I used to believe trust was an unbreakable bond, forged through love and tempered by the daily trials of a shared life. My name is Samuel Coleman, and 6 years ago, I married the woman I thought would be my partner in both sunshine and storms. Even though I'd had a complicated past involving a secret medical condition, I still believed we could navigate life together with honesty and devotion. I never expected that my marriage would unravel around a single, shattering revelation. The day my wife announced she was pregnant, even though I'd known for years I couldn't father children. The irony lays in how ordinary that day began. I was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through emails on my phone. She came in with a look of trembling excitement that I assumed was about a new project at work or maybe a spontaneous weekend getaway. Instead, she showed me a plastic stick and uttered those two words: "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed felt deafening, and I could feel my heart twist. I'd undergone a surgery in my early 20s that left me sterile, a fact I'd shared with her shortly after we got married. At first, I wanted to believe in miracles. Maybe the doctors made a mistake, or my condition wasn't as definitive as they claimed. But a quick, panicked trip to my old urologist confirmed the truth. There had been no error. My sterility was absolute and irreversible. Standing in the physician's office, I felt my stomach churn like I'd swallowed shards of glass. The child my wife carried could not be mine. The wave of disbelief collided with fury. I had confided everything to her, yet now I found myself on the wrong side of a cruel betrayal. By the time I got home, I felt numb, as though the walls of my reality had turned to vapor. She was there, bustling around the house, visibly excited. I asked her gently how she felt, hoping she might crack open and reveal the truth. She squealed about morning sickness and baby names, painting a cozy picture of our future family. My jaw tightened, but I nodded and pretended to share her joy. A part of me wanted to confront her outright, but another part recognized that what I needed was strategy, time to plan my next move. The first night after her announcement, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The streetlights cast shifting shapes on the walls, reminding me of ghosts. She was beside me, radiating a strange calm that I found infuriating. How could she lie so easily? How could I have misread the woman I married? The next morning, I decided to wait. I needed proof, solid evidence of her infidelity, because in our marriage, trust was once sacred. If I was going to enact vengeance, I wanted it to be undeniable, a reckoning built on irrefutable facts. I started paying closer attention to her schedule. She claimed she had new obligations at work, often coming home later than usual. On 2 occasions, she said she was visiting a friend who lived across town. Something about her behavior felt too rehearsed, as though she'd been planning these alibis for weeks. I installed a small app on her phone, one that secretly forwarded her text messages and call logs to me. I felt guilty, like I was crossing a boundary I'd never imagined. But betrayal demands desperate measures, and I no longer cared about boundaries. Within days, I discovered a number I didn't recognize, saved under an inconspicuous name, Sammy from marketing. For context, her name is Elise. She worked in the human resources department, so the marketing team was on a different floor. It seemed plausible enough that she might interact with them occasionally. Still, my gut told me that something was off. Late one night, while she was asleep, I opened her messaging app and found a conversation dripping with familiarity and inside jokes. They chatted about lunch plans and weekend getaways, none of which had ever involved me. As the weeks passed, their messages grew more intimate. I saw goodnight texts signed with little hearts, references to romantic dinners, and even discussions about the pregnancy. Reading those words stoked an anger so fierce, it felt like a physical force in my chest. She told him he should be more patient, that she needed to maintain appearances with me a bit longer. Each message sharpened my resolve. I had all the confirmation I needed. Elise was carrying another man's child, and she expected me to be none the wiser. I grew quieter around her, playing the role of a supportive, unsuspecting husband. Every time she mentioned the baby, I suppressed the urge to lash out. Instead, I feigned delight, offered back rubs, and cooked her favorite meals. Elise basked in the attention, while I calculated how best to dismantle her world. Some nights, I found myself trembling with a kind of cold, focused rage that I'd never experienced before. I realized that once innocence is shattered, there can be no going back. Forgiveness was out of the question. replaced by a craving for justice. While I continued to gather data, I also consulted a lawyer, discreetly. In the eyes of the law, a child conceived during a marriage is presumed to be the husband's unless proven otherwise. I had no intention of raising someone else's kid or getting stuck with child support payments down the road. My attorney advised me to wait until the child was born, then request a paternity test. But that route would have kept me tied to her for months, living under the same roof, enduring her lies. I wanted a more immediate sort of retribution. I started documenting every suspicious text, every date reference, every photo they exchanged. I kept screenshots of their phone calls, correlating them with her alleged business meetings or dinner with friends. Each piece of evidence became a stepping stone leading me toward a final confrontation. I wanted to ensure that when the moment came, Elise couldn't twist the narrative. There would be no illusions that this was some unfortunate accident or misguided fling. She was systematically deceiving me, weaving a fantasy life that cut me out entirely. I refused to be the oblivious husband any longer. One evening, I discovered her phone bill in the mail. I sat down at the dining table, scanning pages of calls and text logs. It was staggering how often she'd been in contact with her lover. The record highlighted entire weekends peppered with communications. She was even texting him while we were in the same room, just out of my line of sight. My pulse pounded as I realized I had spent entire days ignorant of this double life. That was my turning point. I could no longer stand by and let her orchestrate this charade. I took a week off work, citing family matters. In reality, I was orchestrating a calculated collapse of our marriage. I planned everything meticulously, from the confrontation to the exit strategy. I wasn't just going to leave her, I intended to expose her betrayal in a way she couldn't easily recover from. That might sound cruel, but any sympathy I once held was eclipsed by the burning knowledge that she was carrying another man's child and planned to pass it off as mine. The law might grant her certain protections, but I wanted to strike first. Part of my plan involved revealing her infidelity to her family and close friends, but only after I had confronted her face to face. I still felt a shred of decency, wanting to give her the chance to explain herself, though I couldn't fathom any justification that would repair what she'd broken. Also, I needed to ensure that I controlled the narrative before she spun a different story, painting me as a heartless husband who abandoned her during pregnancy. So I spent nights preparing a digital dossier, complete with time-stamped screenshots, phone records, and any relevant emails. When everything was ready, I chose a Thursday evening for the confrontation. Elise arrived home, glowing with that irritating pregnancy aura she'd been flaunting. We had dinner in silence, the tension in the air almost crackling. Finally, I said I had something important to discuss. She placed her fork down and looked at me with cautious curiosity. I could see her mind racing, wondering if I'd discovered her secret or if I was about to bring up something else. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. It was time to end the deception. I began by calmly stating that I knew the baby wasn't mine. Her eyes flickered with panic before she tried to muster a laughable facade of confusion. I slid my phone across the table, showing her a photo of the text she'd exchanged with Sammy from marketing. Her face went pale. I could see the gears turning behind her eyes as she tried to formulate a lie, but there was no escape. I told her I'd known about my sterility all along, that the doctors had confirmed it to be irreversible. The truth lay bare between us. She sputtered excuses about confusion, about not being sure of the test results. Then she switched tactics, claiming it was a miracle, that maybe I wasn't entirely sterile. Her desperation was almost pitiful, but I felt no sympathy. I pressed her, demanding she admit whose child it was. Eventually, she broke down sobbing, whispering his name, Daniel. The revelation didn't shock me. I'd read it all in her messages. Still, hearing the words pour from her lips felt like being stabbed with a knife forged from every lie she'd ever told me. I stood up from the table, unable to bear her presence any longer. When she tried to touch me, I jerked away, telling her not to lay a finger on me. I made it clear we were done. She pleaded, insisted we could work things out. But her words fell on deaf ears. I told her I had evidence of everything, and I'd be forwarding it to my lawyer first thing in the morning. She turned ashen, realizing I wasn't bluffing. In that moment, I saw the hollow shell of the woman I once loved. I slept in the guest room that night, though slept is a generous term. Rage and heartbreak churned inside me, waging a silent war. I replayed every memory, our wedding vows, the times we laughed over trivial jokes, the future we had once envisioned. All of it felt like a sick joke now. Still, I felt a grim satisfaction. For the first time in weeks, I was no longer swallowing my fury. I was acting on it, ensuring that she'd face the consequences of her choices. As the night dragged on, I realized I wasn't sad anymore. I was determined. Before dawn, I quietly packed a suitcase. I wasn't certain where I would go, but I knew I couldn't stay under the same roof. As I slipped out of the house, I left an envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside were copies of some of the incriminating evidence, along with a single sentence scrawled in black ink. I deserve better. That morning, I moved into a short-term rental apartment across town. From there, I contacted my lawyer, initiating the divorce process. Elise called me repeatedly, leaving tearful voicemails. I listened to none of them. Over the following weeks, my lawyer and I prepared for a confrontation in court. She guided me through the steps to demand a paternity test as soon as the baby was born. Financial matters were hashed out, and I was determined not to grant Elise any advantage. The realization that this woman had planned to anchor me with a child that wasn't mine only fueled my resolve. In my darker moments, I fantasized about humiliating her publicly, exposing her affair to everyone she cared about. I wanted her to feel the same sting of betrayal she inflicted on me. Eventually, I settled on a method that would serve as both closure and retribution. I scheduled a meeting with her parents. They had always treated me with kindness, but they deserved to know the truth. On a brisk Saturday afternoon, I arrived at their home unannounced. Her mother answered the door with a concerned smile, and her father looked up from the living room. I calmly explained the situation, showing them the messages, the phone records, and the undeniable proof of Elise's deceit. Their horror and disappointment were palpable. They apologized, tears forming in her mother's eyes. I told them I didn't come for sympathy, I came for the truth. They asked me about the future, about whether I'd consider reconciling. I told them firmly that there would be no reconciliation, no chance of forgiveness. Their daughter had crossed a line that shattered our marriage. I urged them to speak to Elise directly if they wanted more details. Then I left, feeling a sense of grim satisfaction. I knew Elise would be mortified once she discovered I had preemptively exposed her betrayal to her own family. It was a small piece of payback. In the ensuing months, Elise tried everything to win me back. She left messages claiming she was confused, that she'd made a terrible mistake. She wrote lengthy emails describing how she still loved me, how we could raise the baby together, that we could find a new normal. I deleted them all without response. The divorce proceedings advanced, and we negotiated the division of our assets. I insisted on keeping the house, given my significant financial contributions. My lawyer filed motions to protect me from any responsibility for the unborn child, including future support obligations. Shortly before the baby was due, Daniel was forced to face the consequences as well. Elise's affair became public knowledge at her workplace, partly through a carefully placed anonymous email that contained some of the same evidence I'd gathered. Rumors circulated, and Human Resources launched an internal investigation. I heard from acquaintances that Daniel was reassigned to a different branch, effectively separated from Elise in a professional capacity. Their perfect little romance crumbled under the weight of scrutiny. I didn't shed a tear for either of them. They had built their relationship on lies, and lies have sharp edges. The day the baby was born, I received a text from Elise. It simply read, "He's here, please come." My chest tightened as I stared at the message. A swirl of conflicting emotions seized me: anger, pity, sadness, and a faint curiosity about this innocent child who had no say in any of this. Ultimately, though, I decided it was not my place to be there. I deleted the message and continued about my day. My lawyer later confirmed that Elise had listed Daniel as the father on the birth certificate. That was the final closure I needed. When the divorce was finalized, I felt an odd mix of relief and lingering anger. The settlement awarded me the house, as well as protected me from any financial obligations relating to the child. Elise moved out of town shortly afterward, presumably to try and salvage whatever pieces were left of her life. I heard rumors that Daniel stuck around for a bit, but eventually transferred again. Whether they ended up together or not, I didn't care. My focus was on rebuilding my life, rediscovering who I was without her shadow looming over me. In the months that followed, I underwent a transformation. I sought therapy to deal with the immense betrayal and to process the rage that had fueled me for so long. I filled my time with activities I had once abandoned, jogging in the park, cooking elaborate meals, even picking up a paintbrush for the first time in years. My heart was still scarred, but I learned that scars can sometimes serve as reminders of what we've overcome. If nothing else, I had the clarity of knowing I refused to be someone's fool ever again. To outsiders, it might appear as though I overreacted, that I could have handled things with more compassion. But compassion dies a swift death when your entire life is built on a lie. I gave Elise every opportunity to be honest about my sterility before we married, and she knew exactly what she was doing when she cheated on me. She tried to pin a child on me that wasn't mine. In my book, that crosses any line imaginable. I took my revenge in a way that ensured I wouldn't remain a victim. Some might call it harsh, but I call it survival. Occasionally, I still dream about our time together, the happier moments when I was blind to her deception. I wake up feeling a pang of loss, followed quickly by gratitude that I escaped a toxic web. Every day, I remind myself of the lesson. Trust is precious, and when it's violated, you have every right to walk away without forgiveness. My story might not have a fairy tale ending, but it has truth, and that's more valuable to me than any facade of happily ever after. The day Elise claimed she was pregnant marked the end of one life and the beginning of another, where I discovered the strength to stand up for myself. Even though the price was steep, I don't regret paying it. If someone dares betray you so profoundly, you owe them nothing, not kindness, not pity, and certainly not a second chance. That's the raw, unvarnished truth I had to learn, and in the end, it set me free. In the aftermath, I discovered that real power lies in refusing to be a casualty of someone else's gross dishonesty. I learned that self-worth can triumph over betrayal, that boundaries protect the soul, and that walking away can be an act of profound courage. My heart is no longer naive, but it is stronger, and I treasure that above all.